because everything's so up and down at the moment, more so than ever. And I get that feeling across the board. There's a lot of uncertainty around there. It's not the most certain of industries at the best of times.
The restaurant landscape is always changing. Restaurants are closing, restaurants are opening. Something that I think we've probably all noticed is the preponderance of groups, people who are consolidating the back end and opening, a number of restaurants, sometimes dozens of restaurants. I think in such a landscape, I think that's all interesting and good restaurants can come from that. But I think it's important, especially to treasure our independent restaurants around the country and the people who work so hard to keep them afloat, make them flourish and look after their community. Today, our guest is Mike Baker. He is an owner at Henry Sugar in Carlton North in Melbourne. Mike, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thanks, Dani.
Really good to have you on the show. I love what you're doing at Henry Sugar. For people who haven't been there, can you tell us a bit about the restaurant?
Yeah, so we have always focused on local produce. It's taken us a long time, I guess, to find our identity. Myself coming from quite a fine dining background, but that's not what we wanted to create there. So now we work with as many Australian producers as we possibly can. The food is simplified over the years, but it's rustic with all the flavors and the surprise and the twists that you are often associated with a sort of higher level of dining, but it's very honest and it's a lot more rustic these days, I would say.
And tell us about the community that you're part of, who comes to the restaurant and what kind of experience do they have?
A lot of locals come. That's what's got us through COVID, or it's a big part of what's got us through. But we also have people coming from all over the show. I mean, word of mouth, despite all the advertising and the social media and the SEO and things you can do to raise the profile of your restaurant, nothing seems to be as strong and authentic as word of mouth.
That's kind of refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. But it's it's still challenging. I think everything needs to be in line, but I think word of mouth and I guess just that organic. The same goes for SEO as well. Like just the organic articles, the things that you can't really pay for are sort of more powerful than getting all of that back end stuff in line. I feel.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Well, speaking of the back end, we love to talk about the business of hospitality here on Dirty Linen. And I suppose it'd be a rare restaurant that hasn't experimented with different models over the last few years. But tell us about some of the shifts that you've made and the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, look, I think our biggest two shifts have been in trying to become more of a casual place, because I think we've always been perceived as quite fancy. I feel like it's quite hard to put your finger on. It's a number of things, lighting and that kind of thing. We want to create a really a cozy space. So transitioning from that sort of perception to something that's actually more casual, more of a bar vibe, more of somewhere where you can drop in, but still do a set menu, that's been one of the bigger challenges over the last few years. And then in the last few years, I think labor has just been like the costs, just straight up labor costs have just been our biggest challenge. So what we've been focusing on and what I kind of wanted to talk a bit about today was how I feel the labor costs in Australia are designing restaurant menus and what that's doing to the diversity of and landscape of concepts and in business, probably not just limited to hospitality, but certainly something that I'm more aware of in hospitality.
That's such an interesting take. I suppose it's not unusual to hear people talk about the challenges of high wage costs, but then to think about the broader implications of those just beyond, how it looks on a spreadsheet is really interesting. So, tell me more about what you mean.
Yeah, so I guess there's certain things that I I need to do now that I would not have considered doing when we first opened, although that's probably quite a charitable way of saying it, I suppose. I probably wouldn't slap myself in the face, but for even suggesting to, make sauces in large batches or things like that, like, wanted to do everything fresh, but the numbers just don't add up at the moment. Like if we've got chefs starting at 9 o'clock, because of course we're, the model of paying someone for 40 hours and then working 60, 65 is long gone, as it should be. But that does, I feel, in many cases, change the kind of structure. So I think it gives way to a lot of groups, as you mentioned in the beginning, where you have that model that you can apply and replicate and have those margins down to a T, which is important, obviously, to be profitable. But so that's something that's probably been a pretty big challenge for me, is just coming to terms with, I guess, a balance of putting out food that I still think is awesome and that I'm still proud of, that's still that I would be stoked to eat if I went out, but that is easier to produce for maybe staff that don't necessarily have a long background in cooking, just dishes that can be done on a scalable level more efficiently in bigger batches, that kind of thing, which is not really something I would have even taken into account when we first opened.
Yeah, it's so interesting. What else have you done, or what else can't you do given these realities? Like, can you give us some concrete examples about how it impacts a menu?
Little herbs on plates, like extra kind of steps, those sorts of things are kind of out. I think anything that's like just too prep heavy, like that would require, like, I don't know, like Valentine's or something, that you have to meticulously debone the chicken, that we have done in the past, and it's awesome, but we just now we'd be more like, how do we get these incredible flavors into something like an organic chicken from RM Poultry, that's still like an incredible product and still going to taste great, but it's not going to take us 8 hours to prepare. So that's sort of a more of a solid example. Fresher sauces, maybe not. Maybe all of our sauces aren't being cooked for 24 to 48 hours anymore. But yeah, still great, just different.
I think on those sauces, I've chatted to other restaurateurs where they're simply thinking about, it's like wages is definitely part of it, but then it's also just using all that gas or power to have something on the stove for that length of time.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, those bills are getting scary, at home as well. So.
Yeah, that's true. What's the feeling like? I mean, you're running a business. You know that you're only able to, do the good things if you accept the realities that come with it. But is it distressing for you to do these things that you would have, as you say, like slapped yourself for suggesting a few years ago?
Yeah, look, there's times where it's really challenging on a personal level. There is a lot of uncertainty there. It sort of seems like, because obviously those wage costs are connected to the revenue, to the taking of the week. So if you have a busy week, then obviously it's in line. But because everything's so up and down at the moment, more so than ever, and I get that feeling across the board, with the exception of maybe some pubs seem to be a bit more solid. But certainly the feedback from other owners that I've talked to is just so up and down. The spend per head's down. The people that are really spending are the boomers that have got the cash, that have got the properties. Everyone else is just way more conscious about how they're spending, which I totally understand. And so it seems so connected to whether the week is up or down. And so, that is kind of there's a lot of uncertainty around there. I mean, it's not the most certain of industries at the best of times, but particularly in the last year, I'm just noticing a lot of inconsistencies. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm hearing that as well. And yeah, similarly have heard that in that mid range, like that, yeah, pubs are pretty strong. But yeah, I think it is really tricky. But, you know, when you talk about simplifying that chicken dish, you know, a couple of things come to mind. One is that you have chefs that are progressing through their careers without learning those skills or without keeping those skills sharp. And that seems really sad, because then they won't get passed down. And perhaps also they won't have that job satisfaction of doing that real wow factor dish. But also that, you know, when that hits the table, and, you know, I hear Aurum is a beautiful product, and shout out to my collaborator Anthony Huckstep, who chatted to the guys from Aurum on our producers podcast. Go and have a listen to that. It's a great, really fantastic what they're doing, and their stuff is so delicious. So, I mean, but setting aside that beautiful poultry, I feel when, you know, you don't want customers to look at something in front of them in a restaurant and believe that they could do it at home. Even if they couldn't get the same flavours into it. But if it, you know, I think when you take away that wow factor that comes from putting in that time in the kitchen, I feel like that's kind of dangerous as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's something that you've got to juggle. So we kind of try to get that wow factor in. Like, we're always looking for that angle, that element of surprise, balance with, you know, approachability, and often we do that through twists on flavors that people think they know. You know, so there's other ways to kind of to maintain that wow factor whilst keeping those costs in line, I think.
And you also want your staff to have something to talk about at the table, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you're so right. But that's something that we do deal with and think about all the time. So that is in the process, the technique, you know, the scale in which you can do it. You know, if you're fermenting something, you know, you can ferment a whole bucket, goes a long time. Things like that, you know. So yeah, and my staff learning is definitely something really important to me, and for myself learning. So as long as, you know, I've been back in the kitchen for the last 5 weeks. I've got my head chef away, and I'm loving it. So I'm like, if I'm experimenting and I'm learning, then I can be sure that everyone else is learning too, you know.
That's amazing, and that's so nice to hear, because yeah, I feel like I just love writing about food, chatting about food, eating food, and one of the main reasons is that you're always learning. And I think if that wasn't happening, that would be a big part of the satisfaction that would be ebbing away.
Big time. Mm.
Yeah, so interesting. Is there anything else that you want to say about that, Mike? I mean, do you want to talk about wages? Do you feel like that the award needs a shake-up, or is it more about, you know, just accepting that that's the way things are and dealing with the flow-ons?
Look, it's the price of living. I don't think, you know, I don't think people working for restaurant venues are walking around with a whole heap of disposable income. I think it needs to happen. They need to be paid well and fairly. It's still paid relatively low compared to a lot of other industries that you might compare of that level of management or senior position. So no, I don't think it's something that needs to be reassessed. I mean, it should be increasing, you know, but I don't really have any answers, because the simple solution is people just need to pay more for it, you know. But that's a hard one too, you know, especially at the moment. No, I'd be quite worried to be pulling our prices, making our prices much higher, you know.
So well said. Mike, I know that you've recently added accommodation to your business, which is a bit of a left field move. You don't often hear of that for a city restaurant. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it was the most passive business idea I've ever come up with. It's great. Well, it's sort of the concept was so I've lived above the restaurant since we opened, almost over 7 years. It's been so, which has been awesome, and it's exactly where you want to be when you start. I think you want to be close, but after some time, and some would say it could have come before 7 years. I think it's healthy to get some distance and focus a little bit more on a balanced lifestyle. So I made that decision. I've got really cooperative landlords who are fully supportive, and I guess just appreciate the way that we take care of the property. So I proposed to them that we wanted to turn it into an events space and restaurant accommodation. So, and they helped out a little bit with the fit out, but it was a two-way street. And Dan and I did most of it ourselves. We did have a lot of help. My fiance is a fashion designer who's got an absolute killer eye for detail, and my mum's an interior designer and stylist, so she was really helpful. And we pulled it all together over a few months. I moved out to Northcote, definitely a downgrade in residence, but I'm appreciating the space. And then we called it Henry Home. We do a bunch of packages on the website that you can rent, and so you can do dinner and a stay, and Dan and I will host it. There's a few options. You can have it unhosted, you can just rent it out as it is, which is great. And then we've been doing these guest pop-ups with various chefs. I think we've done about 4 now. I did one with Pottery actually a few weeks ago. We've got another one tonight with Caitlin Kother, who's a fermentation wizard and the head chef at Capitano. So her and I have done a vegetarian fermentation menu, which is pretty exciting. So we did that last night. We've got another sitting tonight. And basically we just sort of move the furniture around, put a huge long table down the middle, and it's a big communal kind of sitting. So it's a really unique kind of way to experience dinner. It feels like a home, but it's just, I think it's a really good balance between luxury but also quite homely, and unpretentious, but also with like really cool styling. And yeah, that's just my humble opinion, but yeah, I think it's that's the vibe we're going for anyway. And yeah, it's been really cool. It is something a bit different, and people were really appreciating it. So we'll keep doing those. And I guess the best way to use the space will probably change or become clearer to us. So we're still kind of figuring all of that out at the moment. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I love that. I mean, having been lucky enough to go down to Bray and stay overnight, or go to Provenance and stay overnight, I guess we're Lake House, I guess the idea of these rural or regional experiences where you stay overnight is quite familiar to us, not so much in the urban setting, but it is so nice. I think the staycation certainly came into favour over the last few years, and I think people are still enjoying that, but I think it's just such a nice concept.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've had guests from like Brunswick, for example, that come over to Carlton North. It's a little bit warmer at this time of year,
Love that.
And we had someone from the Yarra Valley stay last weekend who came down, and for dinner they were raving about it. And I was sort of saying it's interesting because I like to go and get an Airbnb out in the Yarra Valley and do something similar and just get away. And they were like, they like to come into the city, and this was just such a good way for them to experience that, the Melbourne lifestyle.
Mike, I know produce is so important to the way that you come up with your menus and look after your guests, and it has been the whole time. But do you think that, or can you talk about the way that you think diners relate to produce these days? Have you seen that change over the years?
I struggle with that. We will always get our produce from farms as much as we can. We still work with Days Walk Farm. I love to tell that story. when we can to customers about where it comes from. But, sometimes I feel like, and I don't know, it sucks to hear this, but I sometimes just feel like most people don't really give a shit, like they kind of do, but they're not really, and so, yeah, like, I mean, it's important for us, and it always will be. There's nothing that's all we need to really know, but yeah, sometimes it feels like it's it's not a story anymore. Like everyone talks about sustainability, local produce. It's like, where else would it be from? Like it's just the norm. It's just the norm. So. Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I kind of wondered if you'd say that, and I think it's true that everyone talks about it to a degree, but then at the same time, there's still a lot of produce that's sourced less thoughtfully than it would be at Henry Sugar, and you sort of think, well, I guess when you're trying to keep prices at a realistic level and present food in a certain way and, look after farmers as well. I guess consumers really do have to either be on board with the narrative or just trust you completely. And if you say it has to be like this and it's yummy, then that's all they care about. But I don't know. I feel like that engagement is so much part of doing things better.
Yeah. There's a little bit of an educational step in there as well, to diners and having your staff explain that well. And then, I think if the proof's in the pudding and it's, and it's delicious and it is one of the best cauliflowers they've had, then I think that's cool, But I mean, a story when it tastes like a normal cauliflower is, I'd lose interest,
And something else I'd love to touch on, I know that cocktails and the drinks program is a really important part of what you do. Can you talk about any, I suppose, like trends or things that seem to be interesting in that space? Are people drinking differently? Are you preparing things differently? Tell me about that.
Yeah, definitely. People are drinking a lot less, I think, because it's expensive and it's just expensive to buy booze. It's expensive for us to buy it. It's expensive to sell it. Also, there's a bit more of a movement in just drinking less for, I think, mental health and general health. So we're seeing a big drop in spend per head on booze, more non-alcoholic stuff. So that's always been an exciting area for us. I think it's still challenging to get. I mean, there are places that do great non-alcoholic drinks, but much as is the case with vegetarian cuisine, the finding that level of flavor, you have to dig a lot deeper and experiment a lot more, I think. And so you often get non-alcoholic drinks that rely on infusions and sugar and sort of find the balance much like a soft drink. So I think it's really cool for us playing around with other ways to impart dryness, impart mouthfeel, to give an experience that, to use the vegetarian analogy again, that doesn't make you miss the steak, you're still just like, wow. So we do that through a lot of fermentation is a great way to get sugars out and add complexity. Vinegars, shrubs, smoke, carbonation, bittering agents that are used in tonics, I think is something that we've been playing around with that, and a whole bunch of things. We'll give anything a go. Not everything works, that's for sure.
Well, if I was going to come in and I was like, I'm not going to drink tonight, Mike, what have you got for me? What would you recommend for me?
There's a blueberry shrub on at the moment, which we use to make a sort of sparkling kind of complex wine thing, like a spritzy kind of wine, I guess you would call it, which I reckon is awesome. That really hits the spot. So that's what I'd recommend. Okay,
I'll definitely have that. And then I want a few snacks. What should I have?
Probably can't go past our savoury donut with a manchego custard inside. I would always recommend to start with that. Also, our focaccia has just been getting better and better. We've been tweaking that, and that's in a really good place. We serve that with our Vegemite butter that we make in house. I'd probably kick off with those two things. We've got quite a few snacks rotating at the moment. Something that I was inspired to make after doing the dinner with Caitlin, who was doing this incredible kind of beetroot steak, and so I've sort of done a version of that where I've turned it into a snack, and it's it's a roast white beetroot that's then been pickled and then dehydrated to get this really pull apart sort of steaky texture, and it's glazed in a onion jus with smoked saltbush on top and crispy shallots, and it's really really meaty and I often put it at the start on our set menu to get the taste buds rolling. I'd probably get you to order one of those.
I do not think that would be a hard sell at all. I'll definitely have one of everything. The blueberry spritzy wine sounds amazing. Sounds so refreshing as we hit that spring weather. Mike, so good to chat to you. Really appreciate your insights and all the hard work you put into making Henry Sugar such a favourite place for so many people. Thanks for sharing with us today on Dirty Linen.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Dani, and for the chat. Yeah.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.